Imran Hussain.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. As we debate the trade bill this afternoon, I wish to focus my remarks on what this bill and the government's trade policy means for human rights around the world in terms of our existing obligations and our commitment as a country to standing up against human rights abuses wherever they take place. When striking trade deals across the world, many nations use trade to influence human rights policy. Yet when faced with the need to strike quick deals to demonstrate success in the aftermath of Brexit, there is a real concern that this government will water down human rights protections, particularly when China, India and Russia, all countries that have a poor record on human rights, rank within the UK's top 25 export and import markets. Madam Deputy Speaker, China's deliberate evasion of human rights is well known, with mass detention, torture and mistreatment of the Uyghur Muslims in particular, along with controls on their daily life. Russia too is notorious for its weak human rights record, with its lack of accountability of those in public office and widespread torture and persecution. Now, whilst any abuse of human rights is abhorrent and must be challenged, it is the Indian government's human rights abuses in Indian-occupied Kashmir, well documented by several human rights organizations, including the United Nations, that is particularly important to my constituents in any trade deals with India. As we speak, the region is now almost 10 months into a brutal lockdown that has seen cities, towns and villages placed under what is effectively a siege, with food, water and medicines restricted from entering and civilians restricted from leaving. This lockdown has also seen communications cut on an unprecedented scale, which has prevented any spread of information and left security forces even more unaccountable, and with a need for reliable information to restrict the spread of coronavirus, this electronic curfew causes yet more harm. Sadly, this experience is nothing new for the sons and daughters of Kashmir. They are routinely subjected to persecution, discrimination and heavy-handed tactics by Indian security forces, with disproportionate uses of force, including the indiscriminate firing of live ammunition and the routine use of pellet guns that have left hundreds of Kashmiris, including children, blind for life. And that is to say nothing of the repressive control measures, rapes, tortures and indiscriminate detentions that take place across the region at the hands of the security forces. Madam Deputy Speaker, what is scandalous is that those committing these human rights abuses are immune from prosecution under the Indian Armed Forces Special Powers Act, rendering them effectively untouchable despite their crimes. The Indian government also continues to deny the Kashmiris their right to self-determination, as was mandated by a United Nations Security Council resolution that is now well over 70 years old. And there is no prospect anytime soon of the vote that will allow them to shape their own destiny, particularly following the illegal decision to revoke Article 370 and 35A that effectively repeal with little autonomy that Kashmir held in its position as a disputed territory at the heart of an unresolved conflict. What the Indian government is doing in Indian-occupied Kashmir is vile and is abhorrent, and it must be called out and challenged. And we cannot let our desire for trade allow us to ignore this. The government must not be afraid to put human rights and high standards before trade, especially where it concerns those nations such as India, who we share strong historic, cultural and social ties with. In this region in particular, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have both a historic and moral duty, and as is the case with all human rights abuses, it is an international issue, not a domestic one or a bilateral one that we cannot and must not ignore. Madam Deputy Speaker, time not permitting, in conclusion, whilst this bill allows the UK to pursue new trade deals, it must not pursue a new approach on human rights which overturns years of hard work in pursuit of a quick deal that turns a blind eye to human rights abuses, human suffering, the abuse of workers or watering down of environmental protections. Instead, it must commit to strengthening our human rights commitments and to ensuring that any future trade deal incorporates the highest standards on human rights. And at the very least, this means an end to the detention camps in China, end to persecution, discrimination and injustice in Kashmir, with the repeal of the Special Powers Act and a free fair and independent plebiscite for Kashmiris to decide their own future in line with the United Nations resolutions which this House has an absolute duty to uphold.